Good to see you. It's good to see you all, the people online as well. As always, thanks to our wonderful translator, Solivara, and her team. Our guest speaker has told me she's coming straight from another meeting. She's made special arrangements to be part of this. She told me a note that said, I'll be a couple of minutes late, but don't worry, I will be there. I'm going to in the interest of time, though, introduce her because then we'll have more time to hear from her directly. So she's an extraordinary person. I've worked with her on a number of important activities about how we can improve our government function. Her name is Beth Simone Noveck. She is a professor at Northeastern University, where she directs a thing called the Governance Lab, and it's MacArthur-funded research network on open governance. Beth is an expert in the interface of technology and governance and innovations in public engagement. She was the first Chief Innovation Officer and chair of the Future of Work Task Force for the state of New Jersey. I believe a position she still holds. She previously served in the White House as the U.S. Deputy Chief Technology Officer and Director of the Open Government Initiative under President Obama. I've talked about it some in this class before, but one of the remarkable things about President Obama was how capable the people who surrounded him were. He had brilliant people, very often relatively young, but incredibly bright and experienced. Beth was among those in every regard, brilliant in her work. She served on numerous advisory boards and panels and was named one of the 100 most creative people in business. Her education includes degrees from Harvard, from the University of Innsbruck, and from Yale Law School. So she holds a PhD, a Juris Doctorate as an attorney, and a degree from Harvard as well. So I'm not sure if she's with us yet or not.
I am.
Hang on,
Beth.
There we go. Can you hear me, Beth?
I do. Can you hear one of me?
No, we can hear one of you. I'm not seeing you though. Let me see if I can see you here on my. If you'll say something, Beth. I did the introduction. Hang on just a sec. Oh, I have to shut up. If you'll say something, you'll appear.
I am speaking again. Can you hear me?
Oh, we have to adjust one thing
But
here.
we don't see you.
We don't see. Is your camera on, Beth?
It is, yes. I see myself. I am here.
I bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll wave.
I see you, Beth. Beth, thank you so much. I just did the introduction. I'm going to pause though before you start. It occurred to me as I was preparing the class today, Beth, when we started back in early August, their first speaker was a gentleman that you may know him, Fergus Bordowich, Gene Bordowich's husband, if you know Gene. And he is the author of the first Congress. And what struck me today was we started the course 4 months ago, learning about the very first Congress. When they, after the Constitutional Convention, they convened. There had never been an institution quite like it, never been a constitution like it. And now we're going to be talking to an expert in all things technology related, things that the founding fathers of our country could never have imagined. And what an appropriate way to begin the class as we did 4 months ago. And Beth, you are our final speaker of the series, and I couldn't ask for a better person to connect us to the future than Beth Noveck. And Beth, the floor is yours. You can share your screen, and then after your remarks, we'll have a great discussion. I will emphasize we have people here in present, and then online from a number of current and former members of the Argentinian Congress and of a number of other countries, as well as members of the diplomatic community, some as far away as India, joining us today. So it is a multinational organization that we've assembled to hear from you, and I'm very grateful for your time. So with that, please join me in welcoming Beth Noveck.
My goodness. Well, I am so honored to be asked. I have seen the list of other speakers, and I definitely feel like the odd person out on such a distinguished list of really incredible people. And I only wish I was a student in this class instead of a speaker in this class, because you've really had the benefit of so many wonderful guests, and more importantly, the benefit of Brian's tremendous insight and expertise. And I have been a student and a fan of Brian's from a distance for quite some time now. So Brian, we talked about quite a number of different topics we can talk about. So per our kind of discussion, I am going to talk about technology. I'm going to talk in particular about AI and what AI really can mean in terms of strengthening citizen trust, in terms of strengthening democracy and strengthening citizen engagement. But I'm going to try to save enough time for conversation and for comments so that we can talk about the waterfront of issues. Obviously, with the election just having taken place, I more want to hear from you than do any talking. So I'll just dive in and we'll see what direction we want to take things in. So, and you can please feel free to interrupt me. I want to thank the translators ahead of time for their hard work. And if I'm speaking too fast, please just send up a lifeline and I will try to slow down. So some of you may be familiar with this, with the man who invented the computer mouse, who invented the word processor, who invented some of the basic technologies that we consider part of our computer systems today. Douglas Engelbart was a famous computer scientist. What's probably a little less known is that Engelbart conducted, and you can find this in Wikipedia, what is sometimes still referred to as the mother of all demos, the mother of all exemplars, where he got up in San Francisco and he began to showcase his ability to communicate back with his lab in Stanford. And you can find, again, in Wikipedia, if you look up this term, mother of all demos, I'm going to look it up myself now just so I can guide you. Here it is, mother of all demos, was this event that took place in 1968. And he was able to show, and imagine 1968, far before the World Wide Web, when the internet was just not even a glimmer in people's eyes in terms of what they were familiar with, the ability to communicate with and work at a distance with his lab back in San Francisco, his lab back in Stanford. And the reason I mention this, and it's kind of, you can still watch the video of this online today, is because Engelbart, I think, really exemplifies a particular kind of technologist, a kind that we don't see enough of today, and a kind that really represents a division in the world, especially of AI experts. That is the people who view artificial intelligence, who view technology as a way of replacing humans, as a way of improving upon and substituting for humans. And those like Engelbart who view technology as a way of augmenting, of helping, of aiding humans. And he was really considered the father of what is sometimes called computer-supported collaborative work. So I was very inspired in my own career. And I will say at the outset, the whole argument of what I want to put to you today is that we need more people focusing on the ways in which technology can help to augment what we do as humans, can augment what we do as institutions, and above all, what we do as democratic institutions. And we have far too little discussion of these aspects of technology. So go back now, this is not 1968, but 1999, very inspired by what Engelbart had done around computer-supported group work. I was interested in the ways in which we could use technology to create computer-supported group deliberation or computer-supported group democracy. And I built one of the first systems for democratic engagement that we called Unchat. It was inspired by the Greek ideal of people coming together to moderate and decide their own governance. And I worked on this project with the now late philosopher who passed away a few years ago, Benjamin Barber. And we built what became one of the first systems for democratic deliberation online. It was very unique because that at the bottom of the screen, you will see this moderation functionality, the ability to moderate the conversation. I won't go into the details now about how it worked, but essentially that screen where it says moderator would pass from person to person in the conversation by vote. So every person in the room could potentially take a turn running the conversation. The idea being that if you ran the conversation, you would be more effective at participating in the conversation. You would have a more civil and civic discourse, and you would do a better job at participating. Fast forward to the world of the World Wide Web, and we've seen lots of experiments in using technology now to engage people online in making decisions. Incentive is probably the earliest and most impactful one. That company, Incentive, has now been renamed Wazoku, sorry, the terrible name, I think. Incentive was a really great name, but they have, as you can see, 200,000 people online helping not just to deliberate, but to solve problems online together. I worked on another project subsequently about 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago now, which was to take what we were learning in terms of using technology for citizens to engage. And I built the first, what you might call, expert system for citizens to participate in government decision-making. We built a system called peer-to-patent, in which scientists and technologists could help, in the first instance, the US Patent Office by providing better information to use in deciding about a receipt of, about the giving of a patent. And that system subsequently was trialed in South Korea, in the UK, in Japan, and in other jurisdictions, and has led to changes in how globally patent offices now get information when they examine a patent. But as many successes as we've seen, we've also seen a lot of issues with using the web to engage with people. This is probably one of the most famous examples, Bodie McBoatface, when the British Science Agency asked the citizen, the National Natural Environment Research Council in the UK, asked the public for what to name this research vessel. And of course, as you probably remember, the winning entry was Bodie McBoatface. I still think they should have kept that name instead of calling it the David Attenborough, which is what they later named the ship. But it was indicative of, as funny as it was indicative of a broader set of issues we've seen with trying to use technology to engage with residents. And that is what I would summarize as the problem of too many people speaking and not enough people listening. Now, there have been great success stories with using the web to engage with residents. I will say, especially in Latin America, probably better than anywhere else in the world. But in short, even in the best places, it's been challenging for institutions to have the time and to have the resources to make use of what people are telling them. So when I worked for the Obama administration, we ran this project where we asked citizens for ideas for the new administration. And we got, I don't remember the number now, it's probably like 160,000 proposals. And of course, the number of them that we used was exactly zero, because nobody had the time, the energy, the tools to be able to read any of the things that people were telling us. The information was too voluminous. In the United States, we have a system whereby we have a law which says that citizens and residents, you don't have to be a citizen, can participate and comment on federal agency regulatory rulemaking. So whenever an agency wants to enact a rule, it has to go out and ask the public for its comments. Generally speaking, no one comments on these things except a few lobbyists. But sometimes you get a request, and what happens is, as is the case in the net neutrality decision making, 22 million people submitted comments. As it turned out, only 6% of those comments were actually unique comments. The problem is not limited to the US. Some of you may be familiar with the Decide Madrid platform. It sits on open source software, which is used globally around the world. In this case, Madrid had 460,000 people sign up for this citizen engagement platform, but at least in their proposals feature, what they call the propuestas feature of the site, as you can see here, they've only had of 28,000 proposals submitted by 460,000 people. They've only had one proposal that's actually moved forward to be considered by the city council. So to me, there's a terrific waste of citizen talent, of citizen ideas, of citizen time, that because we're not using people's time well, because their input isn't relevant, because it's not helpful to the way we're working in government, we are contributing to the distrust in government that is so rampant across the world. I'm going to skip ahead because I want to get to talking more about AI. And to our discussion. But I think we can ask the question, does citizen participation actually matter to how we work in government? And if you, according to the OECD and a survey that they've taken, there is most people will tell you no. They will tell you that they don't feel that they're heard, that they don't feel that their input matters, that they don't feel that governments are listening to them when they do talk. So I think we had a lot of hope that the internet would lead to this great revival of Greek democratic ideals, and that has not come to be the case. However, the argument I want to put to you is that AI, if we use it well, could help change that. AI could help us move from a world in which people are talking to a one in which institutions are actually able to hear and to listen. So in order to make that case to you, I first want to ask people here, we didn't set up a poll, and I don't know if we have a way to see hands, Brian. You have a room there of people. I'm curious, how many people in the room, I'm going to ask you just two options. How many people in the room use ChatGPT all day long? You can raise your hand in the room, or you can raise your hand online. How many people are using ChatGPT or something like it all day long? And then Brian, I need you to tell me how many hands go up.
We have one in this room, but people can also raise their hands on the online participation as well. So if you can. Yeah.
I see one person in a car, you know, we don't want to cause any accidents, but let's ask a second question. How many people have tried ChatGPT but don't use it? More hands? No hands. And how many people, so I'm seeing, let's see, online, I'm seeing, let me see if I can see here. I can't quite see because of the slides. I'm seeing 2 hands go up as having tried it but don't really use it. And then how many people are in the never tried it category?
You skipped an important category, Beth. You skipped a category. We've tried it. You said you jumped from we use it once a day or all day long to tried but don't use. So there may be, like myself, I've tried it. I use it a couple of times a week. So
okay. I'm this is a bad survey here. So I'll let you conduct the survey then. You do it and I will, so because you can see.
I just think that's an important category. People who've tried it, they may not use it every day, but they use it fairly regularly, or you know.
Okay, let's ask that question. How many people use it regularly, by which we mean any of those 3, once a day, 2 to 5 times a week, or monthly? How many people use it somewhat regularly? Brian is 1. You seem to be alone. Nope, 2. I see two hands raised.
No others in here, yeah. Yeah. So
2 to 5 times a week. Very little. Okay, 2 to 5 times a week is still a lot. Let's go to the how many people have never tried it category. Three hands raised.
2, 3, 4.
And several online, sure.
You have to put down your hand, Brian, because for the count here. We have some diversity. 4. So some people who've never tried it, some people who try it but not use it, but not much. And we have a couple of power users. The reason I want to ask this is because maybe I will just take a moment to provide a little clarification about AI and generative AI in particular, before diving in to talk more about the citizen engagement piece, since I think it's worth, and again, happy to answer any questions, but I want to just say right at the outset that AI is nothing more than a set of data processing tools. That is all that it is. Here, I put up a definition from IBM, but there is so much hype in the media and so much discussion about, what's happening at OpenAI or the way AI is going to eat all of our jobs, that I think we tend to lose sight of the fact that these are a set of data processing tools. We hear about 2 kinds of AI in particular. One is machine learning and one is generative AI. So in just 10 seconds, let me say machine learning, which has been around for many years, is simply a set of tools that allows us to take a large quantity of data to tell the computer, this is examples of what I'm looking for. Now go out and find all the other examples. So I'll give you a case here from government that has been in the news recently. California fed into a machine learning algorithm a large number of examples of wildfires. Said, these are pictures of fires. This is what you're looking for. And then the computer is able on its own to look at new pictures and say, that's a fire, that's a fire, that's a fire. It is dramatically changing the ability to spot wildfires and therefore to put them out faster and sooner, which is a very important consideration, especially on the West Coast of the United States. But machine learning is basically just this act, taking a large amount of data, telling it, these are examples of what you're looking for, now go find the other examples. Generative AI is simply a special example, a subset of machine learning that's different in 2 ways. One is the data that we're talking about is often words instead of numbers, and words are just another form of data. It's no different. But it's data, it's machine learning trained on billions and billions of words from the internet. And it's really good at spotting and recognizing those patterns. But more than that, you don't have to give it all the examples ahead of time. It's what's called unsupervised machine learning, because it's looked at examples of how language has been used before, or music, or images. It can then figure out, it can replicate, it can reproduce language in the way that we would use it. So ChatGPT, now the most famous generative AI technology, is about a year old. It launched this week. It's a year ago. And it's really good at doing 2 things really well. One is it's really good at creating content. So here is an example of my asking it, who are the best steakhouses in Buenos Aires? And it can write me an essay about the best places to go eat a steak in Argentina. It is, It can not only create words, though, it can also create images. DALL-E 3 is one of the OpenAI tools. Midjourney is another one. I'm from New York originally, so here are 2 examples of original images created by DALL-E of the legendary New York pizza rat, which is a very famous character from New York. Rats eating pizza in different styles that I've created. But it's also really good, not just at creating content in one way, it's really good at creating content with different voices. So I'm gonna take off my headphones so you can hear this.
Greetings, good sirs. May I have the pleasure of knowing your names?
I'm Matt, and that's Vache.
A pleasure to meet you, Matt and Vacha. Shall we commence our journey?
So I'll stop there. It's a long video of these Boston Dynamic robots that have been given a personality. Hopefully you can still see my slides, Brian. Are you seeing slides now?
Yes.
Okay, good. But you can tell ChatGPT, please speak to me like a British butler, please speak to me like a 4-year-old child, please speak to me in Spanish. And it's extraordinarily good at adopting and creating content in different styles and voices. But I think even more important, AI is a powerful set of tools, not because it's so good at creating content, but because it's so good at analyzing content. And let me explain what I mean here with a more common example. So all of us on our phone are familiar with the fact that your phone will come to you and say, hey, would you like an album of all of the photos from your summer vacation? Or all of the photos of you eating dinner, or all the pictures of your dog? It's really good at taking content and organizing it without your even telling it what to do. Again, that ability to spot patterns and organize information without being told what to do. So here I put into ChatGPT, not the free version, GPT 3.5, but the paid version, GPT-4. And I asked it the best steak restaurant in Buenos Aires. So now you can see it's visiting different websites like Secrets of Buenos Aires, and it will tell you exactly which websites it's going to. It is organizing and synthesizing information. And then it's going to, again, write me a list, not that it's produced itself, but that it has researched, compiled, and edited from a variety of different sources, telling me which is the best restaurant to go to in Buenos Aires. Brian, I don't know if you've eaten at these places yet, and whether you agree with the AI. We can talk about its, the downsides and what it's good at and what it doesn't know, but it is really good at synthesizing large quantities of information and distilling it. So what for government, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
What did you think of ChatGPT's recommendations?
Looks pretty good.
Yeah.
You're getting some affirmation that ChatGPT likes steak. I don't know how ChatGPT ever tried steak, but yeah, it's a generally favorable review of the favorable reviews.
Okay, I am pleased to know that ChatGPT got it right. In case you want to know about hallucinations, it's getting better at not hallucinating its steak recommendations. In government, this analysis, one quick example here, has become really, really useful, not just at analyzing content in the sense of words, but analyzing content in the sense of computer code. And governments are starting to use generative AI to look at old computer code, which is what most government systems are running on, and start to spot the mistakes, start to spot the problems, and accelerate the process of modernizing government systems. Okay, I'm going to skip, sorry, I want to skip ahead in my own presentation. I will say, and again, because I want to talk about the democratic engagement piece, but I will say California just last week put out a wonderful report, and I did a blog post about it that I just put on LinkedIn today, that summarizes some of the ways in which generative AI in particular can help people in government. What are the uses in government for AI? And again, not enough discussion out there in all the media frenzy and all the media discussion about AI, lots of conversation about AI, but not much about government in AI. And with apologies, I hope from an accessibility perspective, I'm not going to read this right now, but I'm happy to summarize it or put it in the chat so that people can see it, because I want to go ahead to really talk about the use case that is citizen engagement. But there are many others that at the very simplest level starts with just making government websites easier for people to read and making government websites accessible to people in multiple languages much faster and much easier. But now let me go ahead to talk about this use case of citizen engagement. And I want to start with I want to go back to the problem I started with, which is everybody talking and nobody listening. So actually, I'm going to come back to this. I want to show you, oopsie, sorry, I'm going to find it, excuse me. I want to find, that's the slide I'm looking for. I want to give you an example. We did an engagement in the city of Oakland. It was building in Oakland, California. It was building on a project we did in Mexico a few years ago called the Mexico City Challenge. In Mexico, and in Oakland, we went out and asked residents to help us co-design solutions to major urban challenges. So we went out and we asked people, what should we do about homelessness in Oakland? What should we do about gun violence? And we got hundreds of proposals from people, including from a wonderful woman who herself had been not only homeless, but in prison for 20 years. And she had, as a result of her experience, a lot of ideas about how to make housing more accessible to people and what you needed to do, like how you needed to have all housing, you needed the housing to be on one level instead of not having stairs, because older people coming out of prison who are homeless would not be able to walk the stairs, or how important it was to have a bathtub. The problem is her ideas, whoops, let me go back here, in this project didn't get implemented because everybody was talking. We had lots of proposals about building homes for the homeless. We had lots of proposals about what are called tiny homes. And both citizens and the government couldn't hear one another. So now Citizens Foundation, which is an open source provider of technology in Iceland and in the US, has incorporated into the same tools that we used. They have built in generative AI so that now you can say, tell me, what are the top ideas that you're hearing on the site? What are the best proposals about homelessness? Can you summarize what people are saying, making it much easier to understand the content? And I'm going to go here, whoops, I'm going to go forward to some more examples. Citizen Lab, another provider of technology, this one out of Belgium, which is used in hundreds of cities nationally, has been using AI for quite some time. In this case, not generative AI, but what's called natural language technology, to essentially be able to cluster, to categorize what they're hearing from citizens. So again, help me see all the proposals about X. Help me understand the proposals about Y. This ability to organize the content is now making it possible in the city of Hamburg. This is their citizen engagement site called DPAS, where they're using tools for citizen engagement in urban planning. It's enabling, again, the ability for government leaders to say, show me at a glance what everybody's saying. So instead of having to read through thousands of comments, I can see the themes, I can see the patterns, I can map them, I can visualize them. At MIT, they have built a set of tools called Cortico, where they are doing something very similar, not on the web, but in person. Citizens sit around a table, have a conversation, the device in the middle records them, and then produces the same visualizations and organization. What is it that people said? How is it that people felt? What were the sources of agreement? What were the sources of disagreement? It can really enable us to be heard in different ways. ChatGPT, of course, and these generative AI tools can make it easier for people who may not have good literacy skills to be able to do the talking. So here's an example of my asking the tool to help me write my proposal. But even without the ability to communicate in words, or to communicate very well as someone with high literacy skills, it's enabling greater engagement. And here I want to give a shout out to a project my students are working on that I'm about to go see them present, which is a project to help translate and summarize what in the US is called the Individualized Education Program. 15 to 20% of children in schools have a disability, and they receive a document from the state which says these are the services your child will receive. That document is very often 50 to 100 pages of PDF. A normal parent can't understand this document, let alone a parent who does not read or a parent whose native language isn't English. Generative AI is helping parents, students, and educators understand these documents and better be able to engage and advocate for themselves and for their students. There's fantastic new tools like Seamless M4T. It's an open source tool set put out by Meta, formerly Facebook. Forget Google Translate. This is vastly more powerful. It translates into and out of 100 languages in text and into and out of 35 languages in speech. And it's all open source, so it can be built into other platforms to make it easy, and it's the tools we're using to make it fast and easy to translate materials, again, so that people can be equal participants, can level the playing field in terms of engagement. In Helsinki, they are using, sorry, the source here is incorrect. This is not from Citizens Foundation. This is another project called Urbanist AI, my mistake, Urbanist AI. They're a global consortium. This is an example of a project from Helsinki. They are using the generative AI tools that are visual for creating pictures to enable residents not simply to be involved in a text-based project like the education one I showed you, but in urban planning and urban design. So I can say, show me what my city would look like with a bike lane. Show me what it would look like without this parking. Show me what it would look like with trees. So people can help to see and visualize their image for what the future could look like. So last example I want to give you is really to talk about the ways in which these new tools can help us as institutions, as people in government or going into government, to really engage in more complex decision-making much faster and much more effectively. And we've seen from a lot of research, this is a research paper from Harvard Business School. This is not about government, this is about the business world and consulting, but it makes the point that when business consultants are using generative AI, they can do their work much more productively and much more effectively. And the same thing is true for us in government who are making policy, who are having to make difficult decisions. We can do so much, much better with AI than we can do without it. But we cannot do it only with AI. Humans still outperform AI in terms of creativity and in terms of innovation. So we need to be able to think about ways of doing both. And that's where I want to end what we're talking about here, is to really talk about how we can inject AI into practices and processes that use citizen engagement, but make that citizen engagement actually really robust and effective. So Brian can tell you about a project we did together to bring together hundreds of experts on the web to help the US Congress identify ways to engage in more evidence-based policymaking. We most recently are doing another project with another partner organization that Brian and I have been working with called Democracy Fund Voice, where we've been looking for ways of safeguarding our elections in the United States against corruption and election subversion. And we went out again and we asked hundreds of experts. And we asked them, for example, about how we can overcome the problem of abuses to the legal system that have become very characteristic in the United States since the 2020 election. So without going into any of the details on the subject matter, we used engagement both from humans and from AI. Of course, we use the AI to help us summarize the content, to help us record and transcribe what humans told us, but we also used it to ask for and look for solutions. So we can not only ask about steak restaurants in Buenos Aires, we can ask it, what are the best solutions to the problem of abuses of the legal system? And in fact, we're getting great solutions from the AI, the same solutions we get from humans, and then even more solutions than those we get from the AI. So I'm going to move ahead towards the end to, again, I'm happy to get into the details, but essentially we're going through a step-by-step process where we are asking humans, asking AI, asking humans, asking AI to make it faster and easier for us to get knowledge more quickly about how to solve complex problems. The images I'm showing you are all online on GitHub, where we provide all of the documentation and the resources and the tools openly. But I'll end by saying that just today, we are launching a new project designed to address how to get students to better be able to read. So right now we have a serious crisis, especially since COVID, with basic literacy in the United States. Believe it or not, fewer than 40% of students have basic reading ability by the age of 9 or 10 in the US, fewer than 40%. So we're trying to figure out what to do. To do that, we have used AI to help us write the content, to identify what the issues are, so we can now go out and ask humans what we should do, why the problem is occurring, and we can again use that to inform how we to make it more efficient for how we ask humans, to learn what we ask humans to help us ask AI, and vice versa. I will close by just talking about one risk. And I know there's lots of concerns about AI, and I'm happy to talk about them in our discussion. And this is the risk that I mentioned at the outset, which is we cannot use AI to substitute for human engagement. There is the risk that AI is so good at providing information that we're going to stop going out and asking humans. But we should not rely on what are sometimes called silicone samples. What we need to keep thinking about ways in which we can use the technology, not to get rid of human engagement, but to make it faster, easier, cheaper for us to do our democratic imperative, and that is to engage communities, to tap the wisdom and expertise of those of our neighbors, to reach out to humans, and to make it a more efficient and more effective process, not just to ask, not just to talk, but to actually listen, to actually hear what people are saying and to act on it. So with that, let me stop and end the screen share and open it up to conversation and questions and discussion.
Beth, an amazing presentation, and my guess is we're going to have, I'm sure I've already seen a lot of questions. What's your hard stop on the back end in terms of how much do we have you for? Because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions.
So I think we can go till 10 after, if that works on your end, but I know this is your last class, so I'm also happy to do it shorter as long as you would like.
So 10 after, great. Just that much time, we will for sure use it. We have a question right here.
Excellent, your presentation. And you just said that it is important not to substitute people, not to use artificial intelligence in order to substitute people, but in order to use this means of communication in a wise method. But how can you stop? How I think it's this process is unstoppable. You cannot. I am not sure if you can stop the process of in which artificial intelligence will in fact substitute people. How can it be designed? How can it be designed?
Brian, do you want me to respond, or do you want to take 2 or 3 questions and then have a conversation? Up to you.
Let's take one other question, and then we'll combine them. Okay. So, Juan, do you want to call on other guests?
Yes, in order, we have to Victor, Darío, and Paola.
Víctor Albures, de Guatemala.
Gracias. Gracias, buenas tardes. Excelente conferencia. Yo trabajo en el Congreso de la República de Guatemala. Por supuesto, soy un fiel creyente de la tecnología, de los avances tecnológicos y esas herramientas indispensables para la ciencia, la investigación. Pero, por ejemplo, yo trabajo acá en Relaciones Internacionales del Congreso y tengo un departamento que es el de atención ciudadana. Como Congreso hemos sido agresivos, que valga el término, para acercar a la ciudadanía al Congreso y con esto generar una efectiva participación ciudadana, construir ciudadanía. Después de la pandemia hemos visto, y realmente lo digo, estas plataformas para que las sociedades se han acostumbrado a encapsularse en manejar noticias en Twitter, en Facebook, pero no expresan realmente una participación genuina ciudadana. ¿Cuál sería el reto para que la clase política o el Estado en sí, el Estado pueda acercar al ciudadano y formar realmente a ciudadanos ejemplares que no se pierda la humanidad en el ser humano, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿cuál sería ese gran reto aprovechando estas plataformas de inteligencia artificial para no quitar esa parte del ser humano?
Kind of related questions, Beth. Go ahead and take both together if you would.
Yeah, I think the 2 questions are related because the first one was, is it inevitable that we will be trying to use AI to replace humans? And then the question about how do we foster really genuine participation, I think are really very related. Let me say before I answer though, especially for people from legislatures here, they're actually a company out of Brazil that does a lot of wonderful education for people in parliaments and in legislatures about technology called Bussola Tech. Some of you may know them. Maybe we have some Brazilians here. Their materials are not just in Portuguese. They do Spanish and English, but they are put on very interesting conferences, even more than the ITU, I think, IPU, about legislative tech for legislatures. So I just recommend, I go to a lot of their programs and I like them. So let me try to respond to these briefly. So can we stop the process? I think obviously there's one set of concerns about private businesses and private industry and there's another set of concerns about government. And in both cases, we have to be, as policymakers, as lawmakers, we have to regulate. We have to set the rules and conditions that ensure we are not replacing people. And when it comes to citizen engagement, which we control for governments, it is up to us to ensure we are not we're not using tools that replace humans with AI. It's very understandable. If I'm Coca-Cola, if I'm Pepsi, I want to go out and see what do people think of my product. Companies are going to go out and do those surveys with AI instead of doing it with humans. But if we're a government, we absolutely can ensure that we're going out and talking to people. Now, there's a second part of that, which is when I open up an opportunity for participation, if that website where people are commenting on regulations, for example, the people commenting, many of them are software. Those are bots. That's not people doing the participation. So this gets to the second question about genuine participation and engagement. And how do we create that genuine engagement? So there's one piece of that, which is how do I eliminate the duplicates? How do I eliminate the bots? By the way, I have a plugin installed for Twitter that eliminates anybody. It eliminates a lot of these bots for me. It also eliminates a lot of the paid accounts with the blue checks, so that I don't even see those accounts, and it eliminates a lot of that computerized content. But the real challenge is that we're not creating mechanisms whereby people can meaningfully engage in decision making. We've seen very successful practices started in Latin America, like participatory budgeting, which have worked because we've been asking people to make real decisions. The processes that work are ones that actually get residents to contribute their expertise and their know-how. And Twitter, frankly, isn't designed for that, never was and never will, and surely now isn't. So I think we're at the beginning of a new era where we are able to create more efficient processes that are both faster but also more meaningful. So the project we are launching today, I'll put a link to it in the chat, where we're asking citizens, for example, residents, for example, about AI, about literacy. Sorry, I think it's launching tomorrow. It'll be here. We're going out and asking people, why is this problem happening? And we can get meaningful, substantive responses from people. But we were able to set up the content, create the site, everything. We used AI to make it fast and cheap and easy to set it up, which makes it easier for us to go out and ask people. So this is an unsatisfying answer to a really good question, and I'm happy to answer questions offline about specific tools and specific practices that are working. But the short of it is you have to start by knowing what you want to ask people, only asking people for information that you're actually going to use, and then picking tools that enable you to get that information, using AI to simply make it easier to organize it now than before. So if all you do is say, tell me your opinion, that's all you're going to get, and it won't be very helpful.
Excellent, Beth. Dario Polsky, and then after Dario asks his questions, Paula Lorenzano, please. Introduce yourself briefly before you speak, if you would, Dario.
Hello, my name is Dario Polsky. I'm with the Argentine Foreign Service. First of all, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I wanted to ask about the issue of bias, and social bias, cultural bias, racial bias, however, and I was wondering if generated in AI tools and algorithms, I was wondering if that's an issue in the sort of widespread citizen participation initiatives that you're discussing, and how that, if it is, how that sort of thing is addressed in the interpretation or the collation of the vast amounts of responses that are involved in these sorts of initiatives.
Thank you, Dario. Paula, would you add your question, and we'll let Beth address both?
She's moved.
There we go.
No, here you go. Well, thank you, Beth, for the presentation. My name is Paula Laurenzano, and I work for the United Nations in Argentina. In this case, we're trying to use artificial intelligence for policymaking. And I wanted to share something that I've learned recently, that the experience of a robot that was that discovered how to separate oxygen for hydrogen. It would have taken 2,000 years for humans to do that, and scientists were not preoccupied for artificial intelligence in terms of replacing them, but they were working ahead of it. I mean, that's the result. It would have taken 2,000 years for us to reproduce that situation exactly to produce water in Mars. I guess it was the situation. So they were thinking above that, and they find a place for themselves to keep working side by side with artificial intelligence. So I guess that could be anybody's challenge. What to do, what we get, maybe easier or quicker or more efficiently. I wanted to know your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Beth, go ahead and respond. Two very interesting questions.
I know every question we could talk about for a day, not just 2 minutes. So let me work backwards. I think this question of what qualitatively can we do with AI that we had really no way to do before? And you give this scientific example. I'll give you another one in the chat that I like. This one is research out of MIT. It's like the wildfire example I gave before, but again, using millions of examples of breast cancer diagnoses. This researcher has developed a set of AI tools to be able to look at a mammogram and spot AI better than the human eye could do it. And I say this because I have a wonderful friend who was a member of parliament in Australia who died today of breast cancer at the age of 50. So in her memory, a consummate public servant, phenomenal woman by the name of Peta Murphy. I want to say that out loud because she was an incredible individual. If that tool had existed a few years ago, things might have turned out very differently for her. And I also want people to know about it for their own families and for their own sake. So we have lots of examples in the medical case, and I think we're going to see many more examples in government and governance, like that fire example, like the ability to look through millions of government records and spot fraud and waste and abuse. That will surely be a very high priority use case. And again, in the citizen engagement context, I think it gives us two important possibilities. One is, again, this ability to look at large quantities of information and see the patterns, understand what people are telling us, listen to them in new ways. And this ability, and not just, again, for those of us in government, but for the public to be able to have that understanding as well. The second thing is the ability to solve hard policy problems by looking at vast quantities of information. So what I didn't tell you when I rapidly showed you those slides about complex problem solving, or told you that example about looking for solutions around election denial, election subversion, and democracy problems in the US, is what the AI is doing is it's going out and running 30,000 search queries. Not just like, hey, ChatGPT, how do I solve this problem? It's running 30,000 queries. We're specifically asking it, run scientific searches, run data searches, run policy searches, look at the whole corpus of human knowledge available on the internet and come back to us, turn all of that into solutions. And then what we're doing is we are using different algorithmic techniques to rate and rank the solutions. As we know in government, there's no such thing as the right answer. I need the fastest solution. I need the cheapest solution. I need the solution that is politically the least controversial. I need, I can say I need solutions that are good for cities or good for states or good for national governments or parliaments or executive branch. And it can sift the information to pull out that knowledge. And that allows us to then go off and ask the humans about it and say, what do you think of these ideas the AI has helped us to find? So I think we're at a point in time where for those of us, if you're a legislator looking for solutions to put into legislation, there's such an incredible opportunity here. Sorry, in the interest of time, let me skip to the other question about bias. I will say, and again, we could spend a long time on this. I am worried. I am more, two things here, and a book suggestion. I'm going to find it and put it in the chat. So one thing you don't hear about, there's a lot of discussion right now, especially because there's a new book out about racial bias in AI. So there's a lot of media coverage now about this topic, and there are great dangers, right? You use these tools and they end up for facial recognition. We've seen the examples where facial recognition causes us to pick the wrong person and put them in and arrest them. We've seen the examples where companies hire people who are all male because they look like all the people the company previously hired, and the algorithm compared all the new people to all the old people and said, oh, let's pick all the men. So there's lots of examples of bias, but because these tools are so good at processing information, we have never had a more powerful set of tools for actually spotting bias, for finding discrimination. And on this, I'm going to put I don't know if it's in Spanish yet. I hope it is. There's a phenomenal new book came out last year, that's just about this point, how we can actually use technology to reduce bias, reduce discrimination, and promote equality, because for the first time, I can see the bias. What the data processing lets us do is now see those instances, see those problems, and we can begin to correct them. So if you go into ChatGPT now, and I could show you this, if you go in and say, give me a picture of a surgeon, or give me a picture of a doctor, or give me a picture of a legislator. Last year, it would have given you a picture of a man, a white man, maybe with a beard. Now, if you put it in, it will give you a picture of a Black woman. Because it's being trained, it's being driven, there is a human in the loop, as they say, to try to correct for these problems of bias. Are we there yet, Dario? Have we solved this? Far from it. And we have to be very, very vigilant, and it's a place we need to legislate. But it is a place where it is a fixable problem if we have the will to fix it.
Beth, I want to ask my colleague Juan de Dios to ask a question, and then I'm going to ask one other question, and we'll finish with those. We can keep you here another hour, I'm sure. But Juan de Dios, Juan is the head of the program here, a brilliant scholar, leader in the International Parliamentary Union. I think you've done some work with Juan on a couple of forums, possibly. Juan de Dios.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, Beth, for your excellent presentation and the answer to the questions. I want to see the positive side of the technology, and particularly artificial intelligence. I want to ask you about the concept of digital citizen. If you think that in the future, we will have the possibility to have each one of us technological means to be connected with the governments and basically the possibility almost to be online for making opinions about important things at all levels, not just the cities, but also subnational level, national level. I understand the complexity, but I think that here the important thing is how to improve the government. That's basically the big challenge for everybody. And because democracy is in danger, and it is in danger because of the bad misfunctioning of democracy, I think we can see the good of artificial intelligence for processing big data related to the real opinion of the people. But the question is, what do you think about digital citizens and the possibility to have safe and not, how do you say when something is not anonymous, all right? Because I think anonymous is something very risky, something very well regulated. We know that the people that is making an opinion is somebody, real people.
We have one other super quick question, like one sentence question. Maybe you.
Una pequeña pregunta, no sé si cabe, pero ¿la relación entre el ser humano y la inteligencia artificial es genérica o la inteligencia artificial crea un perfil de la persona que está preguntando y ese perfil o esas correcciones que pueda hacer las pueda llegar a compartir con la red y con otras personas? ¿Qué pasa en esos casos?
Two quite different questions, but related in some way.
So I'll go backwards. The second one, the answer is there's no one set of tools. You hear a lot in the news about ChatGPT, which is owned by the company OpenAI, but there are other tools, Bard from Google and Claude from a company called Anthropic, and of course Microsoft will build in lots of these. There is also AI built in now to almost every tool you use. So there is no one answer to this, but in short, it does collect information. For the most part, these tools do collect information about you so that it can give you information in the form that you want it. But you can also steer it like a car. You can tell it, I want you to respond as if I'm 10 years old. I want you to respond in a different language. And you can guide it. Some of these tools also allow you to not to log in and tell it who you are, but most of them do require you to log in and to sign a terms of service. In most cases, we don't have government-friendly terms of service or anonymous options yet, so I think that's coming. But as much as it tries to personalize it to you, you can also personalize it in the way that you want to, including telling it, don't give me answers to questions, give me questions. So my son uses the tool to test him in physics. So he says, I want you to ask me questions so that I can pass my physics test. So that it doesn't give answers, it gives questions. So in short, you can steer it. And that's one of the most powerful things about it. I think the answer to the digital citizens question is yes. The more accountable, so again, it depends on, let me say that the very quick answer here is that, and it's a longer topic as most of this is, I think it's a mistake to only have one form of engagement. I think one of our big mistakes with the web is it's so much work to organize engagement that we do one thing, or we get so excited about one tool or one method, we do this one thing. Either it's anonymous or it's accountable or it's this platform or that platform. How much more powerful when we can go out and ask people anonymously, and then go out and ask people again, registered with their name, and go out and ask people in ways that take 30 seconds to participate and other ways that take an hour to participate, and then combine all those together. the short answer is I don't have to decide anymore because it's so much faster for me to process the information. So I will just end by saying that if you have not tried these tools or not spent much time with them, I would just strongly encourage you to do so. And I will put a link in the chat for those who are faint of heart and have not tried ChatGPT at all. If you go here, you will find two free videos. I would go to the second one, which is available in Spanish and in English, where we just provide a 10-minute introduction to what is ChatGPT, what is generative AI, and how do I use it in government. We're in the process of actually creating new courses around generative AI and running workshops right now to ask people in government, what is it that we need to know in government in order to better serve our constituents? I just came from that workshop right now, and we'll be launching new free courses in January. Everything is free, everything is open, and everything is available for translation. So I hope that people will take us up on our offer to steal what we want to give and ensure that you try these things and see for yourself what you think and what's possible.
Beth, this is, the word awesome is overused, but in this case, I'll use it. This has been an awesome presentation.
Thank you, Brian. I wish I were a fly on the wall for the rest of the conversation about the elections, but I have to go teach my in-person class now, so
We're
I will.
grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I'm happy to share the slides if it went too fast, so I'll send those to you by email.
What's that, Beth?
Thank you.
Take care. Enjoy your class. Give them my best.
Bye.
Well,
Thank you to the translators. Thank you.
excellent. Well, amazing presentation for me anyway. So what we'll do now, and I hope everyone will come back after this, because we have really exciting and important work to do still. One wants to make a comment.
I want to tell you something we have here to Rodrigo Goñi, who was some kind of like the general coordinator of the Summit of the Future of all parliaments around the world with the EE.UU. Just
Before we break.
if you want to say hello to him, I don't know.
Yes, well, I would, Rodrigo, gracias por asistir. Please let me invite you to offer your commentary. I did not see that you were on one. Thank you so much. We are not going to break. We have another expert, unanticipated, but Rodrigo, please share your insights.
Diputado de la República Oriental del Uruguay y quien preside la Comisión del Futuro del Parlamento del Uruguay.
¿Me escuchan ahí?
Escucho bien.
No puedo así.
Se escucha perfecto.
No puedo. No puedo.
No puede hablar, no puede hablar.
Pero te escuchamos, yo te escucho perfecto, Rodrigo.
¿Me escuchan bien?
Sí, yo te escucho perfecto.
Bueno, no, muy interesante. Solamente agradecerles la invitación. Estoy justo ahora en un foro sobre internet en Colombia, así que quería por lo menos compartir un ratito con ustedes y engancharme, así que me invitan para la próxima. Creo que está claro la necesidad que tenemos todos y también, sobre todo a nivel parlamentario, de hacer este conocimiento, esta toma de conciencia de todo lo que tenemos para aprovechar, pero que si no lo informamos, sobre todo para muchas generaciones, entre las cuales me incluyo, que necesitamos hacer una transición, bueno, nos vamos a perder esta gran oportunidad que, como ahora en este ratito quedaba claro, las sociedades tienen en forma impresionante, incluso para las más subdesarrolladas como nosotros, de saltearnos varias etapas y aprovechar de lleno este potencial enorme de la inteligencia artificial y, por supuesto, poder prevenir sus riesgos. Eso no lo vamos a lograr si no hacemos este tipo de instancias de conocer, de poner el tema en la agenda política. Es absolutamente necesario para evitar otro riesgo que pocas veces se habla, que es el riesgo político de los parlamentarios, que cuando nos metemos a regular estos temas y estas herramientas tan complejas, sin conocimiento y sin las diversas perspectivas, metemos siempre la pata y terminamos haciendo mucho daño. Por eso reitero como parlamentario la necesidad de participar de estos foros y conocer juntos, aprender juntos para hacer de esta herramienta realmente maravillosa como es todas las nuevas tecnologías y ahora la inteligencia artificial, una herramienta para favorecer el bienestar de nuestras sociedades.
Muy bien dicho, Rodrigo. Rodrigo, con permiso, si puedo seguir con una pregunta que iba a preguntar a Beth, pero voy a preguntar a este grupo también. Desde su parte, claro que él tiene dos puestos, tres puestos. Es profesor, trabaja por el gobierno de Nueva Jersey, por el gobernador, y también es un parte de la sociedad civil. Y hemos oído antes, algunas semanas, de otra mujer impresionante también, que se llama Marcy Harris. Y lo que quisiera tener su opinión. En nuestro país tenemos un sistema de civil society, o sea, más o menos think tank. Pero hay dos formas, hay muchas formas, pero una forma es formado por alguien, normalmente un foundation, no sé cómo se dice, un fundador, para empujar una perspectiva política. Por un lado, pero hay otros como los que soportan a Beth y Marty, su interés es solo mejorar nuestro sistema de gobernar. ¿Cómo podemos mejorar el sistema de participar, de analizar información? Hay este sistema y aquí, y si no, ¿cómo podemos mejorar? O si hay, ¿cómo funciona?
No está aquí, ha ido porque estaba apurado, porque estaba en Colombia dando una conferencia.
Ah, sí.
Pero no sé si alguien quiere dar una opinión con respecto a esto. Yo lo único que puedo decir que en los índices de democracia en todo el mundo se mide la participación de la sociedad civil, la calidad de la participación, bueno, el respeto a las minorías, bueno, hay varios indicadores. Y evidentemente las naciones que tienen mejores indicadores tienen mejor sociedad civil, creo yo, por lógica. Y los que tienen peor calidad democrática tienen una falla, por lo menos, en la interacción entre la sociedad civil y el Estado y la comunidad política. Entonces, simplemente digo eso. A mí me parece que la inteligencia artificial, lamentablemente, se mezclan los temas y uno enseguida va hacia los temores, los peligros, los riesgos. Pero hay otra parte de la inteligencia artificial y en general las nuevas tecnologías, pero particularmente la inteligencia artificial, que es la capacidad de hacer una sociedad más democrática y de tratar de arreglar lo que no funciona bien, que es lo que todo el mundo dice, que es la cuestión de la discrecionalidad y de la arbitrariedad en la política, que en definitiva es la falta de democracia. El gran problema en el mundo son las arbitrariedades, sean de las autocracias o el mal funcionamiento de las democracias, donde algunos tienen más poder que otros y lo utilizan en beneficio propio y no en el del bien común. A mí me parece maravillosa la tecnología aplicada a la reforma del Estado, al mejor funcionamiento del gobierno. Me parece maravilloso. Aquí tenemos expertos como Jorge, tal vez pueda decir algo sobre este en particular.
Jorge, ¿quieres comentar? Por favor, introduce usted para los demás.
Bueno, yo soy director acá de un programa, un posgrado de inteligencia artificial y políticas públicas, de otro tipo de tecnologías y gobierno. Creo que, apuntando a lo que dice Juan de Dios, es importante separar. Un tema es la participación ciudadana y otro tema es inteligencia artificial. Puede ser o no, pero lo importante, digamos, es centrarnos quizás en este tema, en temas de participación ciudadana y cómo eso ayuda a la democracia. El caso testigo acá en la Argentina es el municipio de Vicente López, un municipio cercano a la capital federal, que tiene un sistema de participación ciudadana muy interesante, donde los vecinos hacen propuestas y votan online una vez al año el presupuesto participativo que se pone a su consideración.
Gracias. Interesante. Y hubo un comentario para Víctor también. Quisiera comentar.
Perfecto. Sí, la pregunta que yo le hacía a la señora que anteriormente nos dio esa disertación sobre la inteligencia artificial, yo creo que la debacle del sistema de los partidos políticos a nivel mundial, no quiero quedarme solo en nuestro continente, ha hecho que no sean partidos políticos democratizados. Y ese sistema es el que ha colapsado en las políticas públicas para ver y atreverse a darle estas herramientas tan importantes a la sociedad, que son sociedades que no están todavía, no sé cómo llamarle, no quiero ser excluyente, pero todavía no están adaptadas para un cambio como este. Creo que esa es mi aportación a esto.
Gracias, Víctor. ¿Otro comentario?
Quizás querría agregar que a lo largo de los siglos, algo que siempre digo que aprendí en el colegio, que cambian los medios pero no las conductas del ser humano a lo largo de la historia. Se repiten las conductas valiosas o disvaliosas del ser humano. Entonces esto es un medio buenísimo de la tecnología, pero si la conducta humana repite los mismos errores, con medios distintos, caemos siempre en errores parecidos, que es el autoritarismo, el mal uso de la democracia, el abuso en el ejercicio del poder. Eso es conducta humana. Los medios son estos, mejoraron mucho, pero el Imperio Romano, la antigua Grecia, la Edad Media y ahora. O sea, esa frase que me enseñó un sacerdote en el colegio. A lo largo de los siglos cambian los medios, pero las conductas del ser humano se repiten. Solamente quería contar eso.
Gracias. Pues bueno, llegamos a un momento para un descanso, pero pido a todos a volver, porque vamos a, después del descanso, vamos a revisar todo el curso del curso, quiero decir, desde el principio hasta llegamos aquí y hablar cómo salió y además si hay otros temas que no hemos tenido oportunidades de acercar en este curso hasta ya, podemos levantarlos. Si pueden decir, hasta ahora no hemos tenido oportunidad de charlar sobre esto, o cuál es tu opinión sobre esto, por fin tenemos tiempo abierto para hacerlo. Gracias. ¿Qué te parece si tomamos un 15 minutos de descanso y regresamos al ¿cuál sería? 20 antes de hoy. Menos 20. Ok, vale. Gracias a todos por la participación. Nos veremos en 15 minutos. Looking to see if there are hands up.
Fernando, llena el formulario.
I'm curious.
Maximiliano.
During the break, have a look.
Viene más cerca.
I did during I made a search for ChatGPT asking how different politicians. I asked ChatGPT to make a speech. I think I could share this actually. It's pretty amazing.
Juan,
Make a speech. As if it was, and this not everyone will like it, but as if we were, as if it was making a speech by Javier Milei about So I asked ChatGPT, write a speech as if you were Javier Milei making a speech about taxes, and it was kind of scary how close. Without the wig. I've lost it. I'm so sorry. I was going to share it with you. But you can do it yourself. You can go into ChatGPT and say, write a speech, and you could do it as anybody. You could do a Barack Obama, and as you may know, you can now actually make some of these AI tools can actually make speeches of the same sound. Well, let me ask this, set aside Beth's presentation. Are there any topics that we haven't covered that you would like to discuss today or in our next and final session of the course on a week from tonight? Are there any topics, subjects we have not addressed, you're interested in about either, it could be literally anything relating to government or politics. And then in a little bit, we're going to recap the course, but are there any topics you would like? Because I don't know if I can get experts, but I can gather information or we can just have discussion. Anything that we get?
Something about the next now. How can you feel about the next election in the United States with because Donald Trump is getting harder with the numbers and maybe is going to win. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I am looking into what it would require to become a citizen of Argentina. If we could sell our house between now and next November, believe it or not, I'm actually serious about it. If Donald Trump became the president of the United States,
Is it possible?
it is
Be careful because there were many politicians here in Argentina who said, if Javier Milei wins, I have principles, but I have some others.
No, the issue is actually, to me, it's a moral struggle because I think he's a threat not only to our democracy, but to all.
Yes.
And if I have the privilege of being an American citizen, I have the responsibility to be a good American citizen and be part of the resistance if that's what it becomes. And so if I had to bet.
Yes.
Today, my bet is the next president of the United States will be named Nikki Haley and she'll be a Republican.
Okay.
Nikki Haley. I disagree with her. I'm a Democrat, but she's not crazy. She's not,
That's very important.
she's not as dangerous as Trump. And I think she's most likely, the most likely next president.
Yeah.
I have written a comprehensive piece in which I asserted that I think President Biden should gracefully exit. He's done a marvelous job as president, in my judgment, but the polls show him losing.
Yes.
Beyond that, he's very old. And and I think it's time for a new generation. It's not just because he's old, but I think he's a little out of touch. And look, being a member of Congress for 12 years, being a candidate total for 15, was absolutely exhausting. The pace was 60, 70 hours a week minimum, every night. If I ever had less than a 12-hour day, ever, I can't even remember. I asked myself once, when is the last time, this was when I was in office, when is the last time I had a meal in which I was not working?
Yes.
I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember. It was, we had a journalist who became a friend. He said, can I follow you for a day? Just to see what your life is like. So, and I said, sure. And he came back to Washington, DC. And I said, okay, my day starts at 6:30. Now, when you're in Washington State, you're 4 hours earlier.
Yes.
So 6:30 in the morning, Washington, DC time is 2:30 a.m. And he said, well, I don't really want to get up at 2:30. I said, sure, but I do every week. Because I fly every week back and forth. I'll get to it every week, almost every week. Because I was in a swing district. So it could go Democrat or Republican.
Okay.
So it was very important that the people see me and that I see them, that I can listen to them and be with them. So He joined, if I remember, about 8 o'clock. I'd already been working an hour and a half. We had just a series of people coming to visit my office, meetings, some of which I could take him to, public hearings I could take him to. At some point in the middle of the day, I had to do some fundraising calls. He didn't sit through that. Then we had some more hearings, some action on the floor. He was literally following me around because I'm not just in my office. I'm going to the hearing rooms. I'm going to the floor of the House of Representatives. I'm coming back. I'm meeting constituents. At about 4 in the afternoon, he and his wife said, "Brian, we're going back to the hotel to rest a little bit." And I said, "Sure, that's great." And he said, "How long will you be doing? How long are you working today?" And I said, "Till 11 tonight." 11.
Exhausting.
And why do I say that in the context of President Biden? I can't do that now. And I'm 15 years younger than President Biden. No, I'm more than that. So George Washington, there's a not commonly known quote. I found it. George Washington wrote to a guy named.
Okay, no problem.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
No, nobody knows. I could make it up. Fulano. An American, famous American named Fulanito. He wrote to him. They were trying to get George Washington to run for another office, either serve in the military again or run for office again. And he wrote and he said, basically, even if I could. He basically said this, I'm paraphrasing, I've got the exact quote. He said, even if people wanted me to be elected, and even if I could win, I'm aware of the decline in my own capacities and in the decline in my own political popularity. Because he had, believe it or not, declined a little bit. And he said, his exact words, basically, he said, it would be criminal for me to present myself for the office, knowing the decline I'm in, and knowing there are other younger people who can do the job just as well or better. Now, this is what's interesting. George Washington at the time was more than 10 years younger than either President Biden or President Trump. I think he was 15 years younger. He died 4 months later. Really. And so the point is, Trump is a sociopath. I've said that many times. He's a horrible human being.
Yes.
And we heard Matt McWilliams talk about how dangerous it was that people are supporting him. But President Biden, I think, has an obligation to be responsible. Look, one other thing, and then I'll take another question by civic leaders' hands up. Before being in Congress, I was a neuropsychologist. So I studied brain injuries, strokes, dementia, and worked a lot. Here's what you have to know. On every individual intelligence test, every major individual test, right? Give you a battery of tests. We compare your score to the average of someone your age.
Yes.
So it's called IQ, intelligence quotient. It's your score related to your age, right? And so you have a score that's adjusted for your age. It's not exactly how many items you got right or how fast you did the test.
No.
It's adjusted for your age relative to others in your age span. On every one of those tests, performance goes like this as your sort of 20s, 30s, and then it begins to go down. So I can still have 130 IQ, which would be 2 standard deviations above the mean, but I'm here relative to someone here. It's like if you said in 1995, someone won the 100-meter dash in the Olympics, and no one thought they could win. So now we're 30 years later, let them run again. I think they can still win. No, you can't. It's too hard. Now, Biden has a great staff, etc., and he's a very smart man and he has lots of experience. And he's at least curious and intellectually impressive, but I still think there's younger people. If you want to do a really interesting thing, there was a recent, and I don't know the source, there was a recent podcast with President Barack Obama
Yes.
talking about our topic today, about artificial intelligence. He is so smart. He is so well studied. He has thought about it. When you listen to, if you listen to Donald Trump and you listen to Barack Obama, and you say, how possibly would anyone want this man to be the president when this man is so much smarter? And so, not just smarter, he's curious, he's honest, he's humble, he knows what he doesn't know, he will study to try to find out. And so, back to the question, the big question right now is, do we have enough people who can say, we just understand, as Michael Smith said last week, the severity of the threat that Donald Trump poses. Last thing to say, Donald Trump and some of his supporters have created a list of something like 20,000 civil servant positions. These are not normally non-political positions based on you apply, who has the best qualification. We don't say, did you vote for me? We say, who can do the job best? They are planning to fill thousands of slots with people who just support President Trump.
Pero eso ya pasó acá hace muchas décadas.
I don't know. It's a real business. So, okay, Victor, you had your hand up.
Sí, muchas gracias, Brian. Pues a mí me gustaría para el pensum de esta jornada que podrían incluir un poco más sobre la experiencia de la diplomacia parlamentaria en Estados Unidos y, por favor, cómo manejan la incidencia de la política exterior enfocados en cómo incide el Departamento de Estado ante OEA, ante Naciones Unidas. Y, por ejemplo, en el caso de Guatemala, yo creo que los he aburrido con esto, pero hemos tenido un proceso electoral en Guatemala bastante convulso, bastante atípico, complejo, inédito. Y hemos tenido visitas de muy alto nivel a Guatemala del Departamento de Estado y altos funcionarios de Estados Unidos que apoyan la democracia de nuestro país. Entonces, enfocada a cómo manejan esa política exterior para darles esas indicaciones a sus embajadores que representan ante organismos multilaterales.
Go ahead, Juan de Dios wants to.
Yes, probably to add something to the Victor comment.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's very good. The other day, we were analyzing the death of Henry Kissinger, with 100 years old, and I see everybody writing articles talking about how great it was Henry Kissinger, or as, of course, as a great, I can say, expert with an incredible experience. But I don't have a romantic opinion of Kissinger, the opposite. I think he was practical, but because I was listening to the tapes with Nixon, the talks, that it was an idea of Nixon to recall himself to everybody. They were, of course, it's a human thing, and at that level of government and leadership, global leadership, but the way they talk about countries, about people, about it was really horrible.
It is horrible.
So in my opinion, I think this is important because thanks God we have that, to analyze that, to really learn about that. So foreign policy in the United States many times was pretty wrong in my opinion. And of course, I divide the world between democracy and democracy, and the United States is clearly, particularly because of the result of the Second World War. It was a different terms, but it was in that time was, of course, the totalitarianism, we can say, the different actors, different world. But at the end, I think it's very important to learn from the mistakes. And of course, we need a global governance with the actors that we have nowadays. It's risky, and the state still has a very important role. So what he's saying here, Victor, I think it's key. We need to really try to help together. But it's not bad to criticize, no? It's a open thing. But everybody was saying, oh, Kissinger is a genius. Genius, maybe, but not a nice guy.
Not a nice guy. Well, Victor, it's a great question. I will share my personal perspective on it if it's okay. First of all, Juan and I have talked many times about this, and I have a personal mission to try to get the United States Congress more involved in the International Parliamentary Union. So when I get back to the States, I will try to build champions who understand the value of the we pay here, but in the US IPU. Because why? There's the model in our country is that foreign affairs are governed by the executive branch. That you can't have a lot of independent actors, 435 members of the Congress, 100 senators, 50 governors. If each one of us goes to try to make foreign policy, you can understand how confusing and complicated that is. By the same token, I have a moral responsibility to know what I'm voting on. And I talked a little about this last week, Stan McChrystal was here. Before the Iraq War, I went to the Middle East multiple times, personally. I'll tell you one thing I did, it was subtle. My wife wasn't my travel, my wife does global health. She had a meeting in Cairo. I decided I wanted to go to the Military Museum of Cairo. And it's in an old sort of fortress. And I decided I would walk there directly, not take a cab, not the bus. I walked through parts of Cairo where they looked at me like, what are you doing here? You have no business being here. But why did I want to see the Military Museum? Because the question was, the Bush administration was telling us we will be welcomed as liberators. I was in a budget committee hearing when a gentleman named Paul Wolfowitz, one of the architects of the Second Iraq War, said, we will be in and out in a matter of months, so I'm paraphrasing, and it won't cost more than $40 billion. And I said, either this man is a fool, or he's lying to us, or both. But there's no possible way you can conduct an international war with all that entails and occupy another country and defend yourself against insurgencies for $40 billion. It can't happen. So I went there, and in Cairo, I walked to the Military Museum, and I walked through the museum. Almost the entire Military Museum was dedicated to examples of Arab nations fighting Western conquerors. Almost every exhibit from way early battles. This was, you know, in museums, you have an exhibit and there's pictures of airplanes flying or men on horses fighting with swords or whatever. Almost every one was Arab people fighting Europeans in battle. And I said, what is the likelihood that we're going to be seen here by everybody as liberators? And then I talked to the Iraqis, I talked to the Iranians, I talked to Saudis, I talked to Qataris, I talked to Israelis, I talked to our ambassador, I listened. So when I came back home, I had a different perspective than other people did. Not everyone goes. So Victor, I think we need to have those relationships where we can talk to our colleagues from other countries, not in an official public forum where speeches get made and we're trying to show off or something, but where we can just sit and say, I don't understand. Help me understand. Teach me. I want to learn. And then because I know one's insights may be different than your insights, I want to say the same to you, and to you, and to you. And at the end, I get different perspectives. And that may be much different than an administration. And I'll give you one last example, and forgive me for the long dialogue. I think I mentioned here that in 2009, the Israeli government launched an invasion and bombing of Gaza. A colleague of mine named Keith Ellison and I went to Gaza. We were the first American officials into Gaza in more than 5 years. The last group had been affiliated with the Fulbright program, which actually brought me here. And several of them were killed in an assassination, an attack, an armed attack against their convoy. Keith and I were the first Americans to go in since then. There were aid workers, tremendously courageous, generous aid workers on the ground who had been bombed during the invasion. Keith and I went on the ground. Now, if you know American politics, you're not allowed to criticize Israel in American politics. We didn't go for the purpose of criticizing Israel. We went to try to understand what was happening to human beings in the war. Keith and I went, each of us 4 times in total. Till today, no American elected official has been to Gaza more times in the last 20 years than Keith Ellison and myself.
Keith Ellison is an MP also?
Keith Ellison was a member of Congress. He's now the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. Keith Ellison was the first Muslim, I think, maybe the first Muslim elected to the Congress. And he was the head, he led the effort to prosecute the police officer, the officers who killed George Floyd when that happened. Why do I say that? Because when I went there on the ground and met with Palestinians in person from different sides, and met with doctors and nurses and teachers and children, little children who are going to school, it's a lot harder to come back home and just vote the way someone tells you to vote, or to just say, well, they're bombing those civilians, it's nothing, because I know the people. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one question related to that, because it happened to me the same when I was deployed in Kosovo in 2008, and I was living in the south side. So I was working with American colleagues, and they didn't knew at that time what was happening there. And they thought they will be welcome everywhere. And they weren't.
Yeah.
So when you are talking about going to see the other point of view in the field, it's because you were part of the Congress, or because you want to share with your own people what think the American people about to follow or to reach the other point of view. That makes
and you have to Dario Polsky. Probably you want to listen here.
Yes, Dario, let's hear your comments because you with your experience, and then we'll combine it. Excellent point. Dario, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I was wondering, I'm not sure if there was a particular session dedicated to this issue or if it was sort of discussed in different sessions, but there's obviously a debate going on now regarding what kind of world we're living in, as far as a multipolar world or a bipolar world, and I was interested in sort of the idea of how the evolution in the U.S. of the idea of let's say U.S. exceptionalism, and the United States as the indispensable nation, and so I was sort of interested in how that debate, or how that concept is seen today, and how that sort of evolved, and how it relates to this idea of how the U.S. Inserts itself in what many people believe is now a multipolar world, and where the U.S. Role and power is seen as, at least in relative terms, more diminished.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dario, thank you for that. We talked about it a little bit on the day I did the sort of accelerated history of the United States. We talked about the contrast between the U.S. as the intervening force in World War I that stopped the German expansion and led to an armistice after we sent tens of thousands of soldiers to die in the trenches and in the aerospace, but we stopped the German advance. Then in World War II, between World War I and II, there was a withdrawal. We dramatically reduced our military readiness. We dramatically reduced the numbers of our army. We weren't producing warplanes at nearly at the rate of obviously Germany or others, certainly not as like Japan. And then we came in, we had to come in late, but we did. And we fought pretty honorably and liberated concentration camps and not only stopped Nazi Germany, but stopped the Japanese and defeated them. And in the process, blocked much of the Soviet expansion as the Soviet Union was moving and captured other countries.
And in Italy also.
And in Italy, yes, we liberated Italy as well and other places. And I talked about this, Dario, Colin Powell, I think, gave a speech once on the anniversary of the D-Day invasion, if I'm not mistaken. When he said, we brought our men and women over here to fight. We defeated fascism in Japan and in Germany. And the only thing we asked in return was enough space to bury our dead, which is pretty powerful. And we deserved, I think, the respect of the world at that time. There have been instances since then when we have not conducted ourselves as admirably. And that's one of the challenges, Dario, about the exceptionalism. Now, to combine that, in our politics, however, and this goes back to your question, you will find different reasons why members of Congress travel. When I went, I wanted to learn. I wanted to listen. So in Iraq and Afghanistan, my staff member, who I showed a picture of some weeks ago, was a two-tour Vietnam helicopter combat pilot. So he's not afraid. And he and I would fly to the front as far as we could possibly get towards the front. I mean, they don't want you to get killed, obviously, but we got to where we could get killed. And we were there to listen and be respectful and try to learn. There is a branch of members of Congress who go believing we have all the answers. And so they come and they just lecture people. If they don't listen, they don't try to engage. So we have to try to get more members of Congress to go out into the fields of affairs. The phrase I use is respectful curiosity and listen to different sides. And but we have to have, that's where the IPU comes in, back to Victor's question. Being able to have that relationship and pick the phone up and call someone or have dinner with them or whatever is so important. So I hope we should probably do more on international diplomacy. Yes.
Yeah, Congressman, two questions relating maybe for the next class or maybe for future editions of the course. One is a particular topic that I don't know if it was broadly discussed, but the climate policymaking and the role that has in the US, of course, with Trump and everything that happened. And another question more systemic relating to lobbying and how do corporations have influence in the policymaking in Washington and how that works. Maybe that could be interesting.
Yeah, both great questions. We actually were a little bit. We had a guest speaker named Bob. The question was about climate change. We had a very good friend of mine, a Republican named Bob Inglis, who talked about climate change. But I'll add to that a little in response to your question. And then the other part was lobbying. Oh yeah, well they're related, obviously. The influence of money in American politics is probably the second most destructive thing in American politics, if not the most destructive. I think it's the most destructive. It's destructive in two ways. Billionaires and millionaires wield far too much power. I'll give you an example. I was asked to run for Congress in my old district again. To run for Congress, you need to raise $2 to $5 million minimum in a swing district. Now, if you do the math, and you just, let's suppose I raise $1 million a year, the maximum a single individual can write a check for is about $5,000. It's a little different now. But to raise $1 million in a year, there's only 50 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
So that means I have to raise $20,000 every week. That's 52, right? But I get 2 weeks off for Christmas, right? So every week I have to raise $20,000 for 2 years. So how do we do that? We have fundraising events. I get on the phone and I have a whole book like this big. Now it's digital. But in the old days, literally, I'm not exaggerating, this many books. Someone would sit next to me, we'd turn it, and it would say somebody's name. They're head of this company, or they care about the environment, or they're pro women's rights, or they are interested in Israel, or they whatever. And then you call them and you say, hey, it's been a while since we talked. I'm running for re-election. I wonder if you could attend my fundraiser, etc. Meanwhile, lobbyists come to you and they come to events and they write a check for your re-election. None of this comes to me, by the way. If I take a penny of it, a penny for myself, it's against the law. So it all has to go to my campaign. Now, there are ways you can hire your family member as a consultant and people do it, but I never did anything like that. But what happens? Am I spending my time meeting with constituents? Am I spending my time studying issues? Is there some chance that because you can write a bigger check that he can write, that I'm going to pay more attention to you? Is there a chance that if I don't vote the way you thought I should vote, the next time you're going to give to my opponent? Absolutely. Now, that's the problem with the main political giving system. But we also have what's called dark money. Dark money I've talked about here, but it's hard to even imagine this. Dark money means a group is established with the pretext that they're to educate the public. And they're exercising their First Amendment rights. And the Supreme Court has ruled basically that the expenditure of money is equivalent to exercising free speech. So you can spend unlimited amounts of money on a political campaign through these education, entre comillas, education institutes. So here's the decision. If I want to run for Congress again, I'm going to spend a lot of my life begging people for money. So I have some campaign money. But all that has to happen is someone has to say, I don't like the fact that Derek went to Gaza. Or I don't like that he cares about climate change because I'm an oil producer. Or I don't like that he's criticized gambling because I'm a casino owner. And they write a check for unlimited amount of money, limited only by their financial resources. They could spend a check for $100 million attacking me on anything they want. So that distorting power. And so what's happening right now in our presidential politics, you asked earlier, all the billionaires are trying to decide who they're going to back, and they're going to Nikki Haley. They've abandoned DeSantis by and large, who was one of the other Republican candidates who made Trump look nice occasionally. And they're trying to pick the next winner. Because to some extent, they want to own that person a little bit. So the campaign finance thing, and that's related to lobbying.
Yes.
Lobbyists can write you PAC checks. They can write you checks. And so they gain access through their contributions. On the climate change front, I had the privilege of chairing the House Science and Environment Subcommittee. We had an entire hearing. I think you can watch it on, I think it's recorded, where we took the best scientists in the world and had them walk us through the basic science from the beginning. And we've known, scientists have known in laboratories for well more than 100 years that if you increase the percentage of CO2 in an airspace, it will retain more heat from sunlight. We've known that for more than 100 years. We've known also, which we don't talk about when I wrote the legislation, that if you dissolve CO2, carbon dioxide, in water, the water becomes more acidic. And more acidic water dissolves shells of organisms, zooplankton, tiny little crustaceans. You dissolve more oysters, for example, or shellfish. Well, this is the base of the food chain. This is plankton, the zooplankton. If you dissolve their shells, everything up the food chain suffers. Higher CO2 in the water makes the water more acidic. More acidic water dissolves shelled organisms. So we know that. I could do that in this classroom. I could demonstrate that. So we had a hearing where we said, look, this is not abstract, crazy stuff. This is science you can demonstrate in a lab. Now the next question is, are we putting CO2 and methane, et cetera, in the air? Yes, in massive quantities. If that's the case, if the lab science says temperature should increase, are we seeing temperature increases? Absolutely. Absolutely, we're seeing temperature increases. Are we seeing the ocean be more acidic? Absolutely, we're seeing the oceans becoming more acidic. Is it affecting shelter? So we had the best scientists in the world walking chapter and verse through that. We had, I think, 2 Republicans. One was Bob, I think, who sat in, and then the others were hostile to it. And they continued to maintain that climate change is a hoax. And it is fueled by enormous amounts of money. And at the COP conference this week, the host of the COP conference in the Middle East said, there's no compelling science that's going to stop the combustion of fossil fuels. That was said 2 days ago. Money. So we haven't talked a lot about it. So the challenge, though, is if you decide to go to Gaza, imagine the money that can be unleashed against you. If you talk about climate change and criticize the oil industries, imagine the money that could be unleashed against you. If you know, or take a position the left doesn't like. I want to be bipartisan in this. If you say, if you're a Democrat and you say you're anti-abortion, money can be levied against you, etc. The point is, it's not about, you can make good arguments on either side of some of these issues, but it shouldn't be about money.
I have 2 questions. The first one about George Santos, if you have an opinion about that, because it is related to the fundraising and all that. And second, in Argentina, for example, of course, the MPs, they depend for parliamentary diplomacy on the official budget of the National Congress of Argentina, both chambers. But of course, it's a very presidential system. So if the speaker decides not to finance a trip abroad, okay, they can do it. So we don't have, like many other experiences in the world, the capacity to receive some finance from external sources, no? But there are some. For example, in the cases of some chambers, you know, particularly the ones from foreign chambers. But it's a mix between national and foreign companies. It doesn't matter. They finance these trips abroad, no? To politicians from in a plural way, different, and this has been for decades, all right? In democracy. In my opinion, this is something important to analyze in Argentina, to create sources, of course, with transparency and all that, to permit to the MPs in the opposition not to be, you know, depending on the speaker of, the speaker of the, I don't know.
So we have 2 things about that. It's absolute transparency, almost absolute. If you can go on congressionally funded trips, they're called co-dels, congressional delegations, but only the majority controls who gets to go. So the chairman, if you're on a committee, the chairman gets to say whether you want to go. That's the, if you're not in that party, it's hard for you to go. Secondly, they can decline you. They can say, we're attending 10 people, you can't go. Or, you know, they can decide who's there and who's not. There are independent organizations that also fund travel, but there's some limits on how they can fund that, and it has to be public. I have a whole presentation on this, which we didn't get time to do. I had with lots of documentation, so you can look through and see. You can literally look by my name and look at every trip I took. Who sponsored it, where we went, what the costs were. I had a very unfortunate thing happen once. My staff, for convenience, listed the entire cost of a 4-star hotel as my personal expenditure. I was the chairman. It went under my budget line. So the ad is, Congressman, how could you possibly spend, $40,000 at one hotel? I didn't. The whole delegation spent $40,000. And anybody who knows me, by the way,
I have several examples of that.
Yeah.
In Argentina, like Martin.
This is their house. Well, it's done that here, right? There are, sure. But in my case, I'm a mountain climber. I sleep on dirt. I'm happy sleeping on dirt. So they're like, you stayed in a 5-star hotel. Yeah, because security insisted that's where we stay.
You don't decide.
It was not my decision.
Yeah.
But the key point is it's public. It's public. And so how do because you can look that up. So, but Juan, your point is really well taken. We need ways to let members of Congress, and people will abuse it. So we need ways that the responsible members of Congress, not the guys who are just going to get drunk and do stupid things, responsible members can go to places and learn. And one thing that's really I'm passionate about is the oceans. So I wrote the bill to study ocean acidification. It passed, it's a law, and I wrote it. But imagine if you're a member of Congress and you want to, I'm a scuba diver. So if I want to see what's happening to coral reefs, I can go because I know how to do it. I can go with a scientist. She can swim down with me and say, and point, draw on a little chart. This is a healthy coral, this one's dying. It's so powerful. In the Maldives Islands, which used to be a wonderful, wonderful coral, the world, they've had coral bleaching. So the temperature of the oceans got so high that it killed the symbiotic, it's not plankton, that lives on the coral, and I'm just blanking right now. And the coral just died. So I've swum there with scuba gear, and it looks like a forest fire. It looks like dead trees covered with ash. The beautiful corals in the water are gone, just completely dead and destroyed. Well, when you see that with your own eyes, it makes you care about the oceans even more. But if somebody sees a picture of me in the ocean,
look at the cover.
That's the cover, too. Yeah. Especially if they get me in my swimsuit or something, right? Yeah. But how do we keep, I'm not on a yacht with a lingerie model.
Come on, it's happening to my parents.
I'm there I'm with the top scientists in the world studying, but so how do we do that? How do we empower members of Congress and the staff sometimes to go on these trips? Yes, you'll do some sightseeing occasionally, sure. But to where you have personal experience, hands-on, cross-parliamentary training, so important. And Juan's done so much of that.
Victor wants to say something.
Yes, Victor, please.
Gracias. A lo que decía Juan de Dios y lo que explicaba Brian, he tenido la oportunidad de conocer cómo funcionan algunas delegaciones o designaciones de delegaciones parlamentarias que participan en eventos multilaterales o bilaterales. Y creo que hay dos cuestiones. Uno, cuando me refería cabalmente hace un momento a la democratización de los partidos políticos y esa madurez que debe de existir entre los partidos políticos, porque en nuestros países subdesarrollados el revanchismo cobra mucho poder cuando la mesa directiva tiene en sus manos la decisión de quién participa y quién no. Y incluso se transforma en la famosa llamada turismo parlamentario, y no es por meritocracia y con visión de país, con políticas públicas con visión de país, que se integran las delegaciones para que vayan no solo los parlamentarios, sino como decía Brian, el equipo técnico, a nutrirse, a ver derecho comparado, etcétera. Creo que en eso tenemos que apostarle en nuestros países a ir, sin duda alguna, también el escarnio de la sociedad al Congreso. En Guatemala no hay mucha, ¿cómo le llaman en México estos artistas, como tiene Argentina, el tango, el teatro? No hay farándula. Al no haber farándula, los políticos se convierten en el ojo de la sociedad. Y cualquier viaje que hacen no ven los resultados del viaje, de ese intercambio, de esa diplomacia parlamentaria, sino que la primera pregunta es ¿cuánto se gastó el legislador? ¿Cuánto costó su boleto? ¿Cuánto costó el hotel? Entonces creo que tenemos que apuntar a una buena comunicación, pero sobre todo que los diputados que integran el Parlamento tengan esa madurez política.
Sí, muy bien dicho, Víctor. La verdad, lamentablemente, es que hay ciertos congresistas que se aprovechan las oportunidades para viajar, más turismo de trabajo. Y esto rompe la reputación para todos nosotros, destruye la oportunidad, porque cada miembro de la prensa está literalmente escondido atrás de una muralla para sacar una foto y para acusarte de abusar su puesto. Pero tiene razón, Víctor. Estos intercambios se pueden cambiar como entienden el trabajo y la situación del mundo y las necesidades y los intercambios. Como saben todo, es diferente cuando se puede comer al lado de algo, al lado de alguien. Cuando se puede entrar en una zona de la guerra o del hambre o del desastre. Cuando puede sentir la humanidad de otra persona y que comparten los mismos tareas, los mismos desafíos. Eso es tan importante y tenemos que arreglarlo. Y Víctor también tiene razón, el control del partido no puede ser absoluto. Hay que dejar espacio por el ser humano congresista descubrir por sí mismo, sin pedir como suplicante, por favor, puedo tener su permiso, sin castigarles si cambian su mente. Porque he cambiado mucho mi mente a veces por un viaje, pero puedo aceptar el riesgo políticamente, pero no puede castigar tanto los líderes si cambiamos por la experiencia.
Perdón, Víctor habla de mesa directiva, en que tienen casi todos los países latinoamericanos y los parlamentos en el mundo. La Argentina no tiene mesa directiva.
¿Sí?
Tiene un presidente, como si fuera el presidente de la nación, en cada cámara que manda.
¿Sí?
No hay una mesa directiva.
Sí, es
un problema grave de nuestro Congreso.
It's important to understand. We have a budget, a congressional travel budget, completely not controlled by the administration. Completely, can't happen. The President of the United States can't tell me where I want to go or I can't go as a private citizen, or as I can tell you, when I went to Gaza, it was not popular. It was, but we went, and so we are independent. And yes, the Speaker of the House controls things, but we can still go on delegations and we can still make our own opinions, and we do. So it's important.
There is a system of check and balances very strong.
Yeah.
Very strong.
Juan, I want to pause for a second. Do we want to do the review, PowerPoint review now?
I have it if you want, and we can do at the same time but we don't have enough time or probably yet. We can do the review and the
Can we send the questionnaires out and people do it on their own?
Yes, I don't know. Let me ask to the moderator.
Yes, I want to forgive this pause. Juan and I have been working on the course evaluation.
Diana, ¿tienes ahí para mostrarle a Brian la evaluación? No es una evaluación, es una especie de relevamiento. ¿Estás ahí, Diana?
Sí, Juan.
Buenísimo. ¿Podés mostrarlo o no?
Sí.
I don't know how we administer it.
Oh, le preguntamos a ella. We can ask her.
Son las preguntas, ¿no?
Sí, las preguntas.
Bien.
So, Diana, mi pregunta es que es necesario para las participantes cumplirlo ahora mismo o les pueden mandar por chat como una forma que pueden cumplir por sí mismos por internet.
Las preguntas.
Podemos crear un formulario porque y se lo mandamos.
Ok, lo que prefería, Juan, es revisar el curso ahora.
Okay.
Y prometer que vamos a mandar a todos los participantes una forma que ellos podrían cumplir a su propio tiempo.
Ok, perfecto. Pero Diana, no lo borres por las dudas que si decidís usarlo, ya está ahí, porque tienen que hacer el trabajo de cargar.
Sí.
Ok, perfecto, Diana. Lo guardamos para ver si lo vamos a usar o no. En el internet yo me ocupo de que les manden a todo el mundo una ficha que llenan por sí mismo cuando tengan ganas.
Sí.
Perfecto.
Muy bien.
I'm going to go back to English for a second. Yeah. So what Juan and I thought would be interesting to do is to review the course, what we've accomplished together, and it's pretty amazing actually. So we thought we would just go back to the start in August and review the speakers very briefly. We have about a half hour, 20 minutes. We'll review that. After that, between this class, the next week's our last class. So we want to send out an evaluation form. We want you to honestly complete it, say this worked, this didn't, this is how we can make it better, what was working.
It is the evaluation of the program, not of the people.
Yeah. So,
just a question.
Yes.
What about the slides, the
presentation.
The presentation.
Yeah, the question is, what about the slides and the presentations? I think that's a good question. We can make those publicly available. I will make those publicly available. I think all the speakers are available, right?
Yeah, but they send it to you.
What's that?
You are the one who has the presentations.
Okay, so we have to talk about how to make that available.
We need to check each one of them. I have a few of them, and the others you have it.
Oh, okay, I don't
even know that. Send it to me so we can send it.
Okay, so we'll find a way.
There is a drive that we can check. It will be great.
Yeah, between now and next week, we'll try to figure out how to make any of the classes and the lectures available.
We have a campus. We can put it in the campus. But because we didn't receive that will be in advance, we didn't use the campus.
Yeah, okay, so we'll figure this out. It may take us a while, and I will make my PowerPoints available to everyone.
Excellent.
There's lots of resources there.
And the file with the recording of the classes are going to be there.
Yes,
yeah. All of them.
We'll make
Except
it
the one of the ambassador.
And then also, next week, we will formally present next week the entire library that I brought with me. 40 books. Like that. 40 books. And then you can check them out.
Yes, I have it pointed for the week.
Okay, so let's just review.
Yes, I just want to say that in the opening, it was Ramiro Gutierrez.
Yes.
Who was, still is until 2 more days, the president of the Friendship Parliamentary Group with the United States. I just want to say that. He was he is from the ruling party.
And we had the great presentation right from the start, Alfredo Vitalo. And Alfredo, you all know, he's often in the room with us. I learned so much in a very brief time from Alfredo, the similarities between our system in the United States and Argentina. I will tell you, the man's scholarship is amazing. When we would talk, he would say, oh, have you read this book? He'd read books I had never read. He had insights I never had. And I read a lot of books. But Alfredo's curiosity, his probing mind, and his knowledge of your system and ours and many others is really extraordinary. Perfect person. And I'm hoping we can get Alfredo to come back next week. He doesn't know this, but I'd like him to come back and offer some closing comments about what he's learned. Then the next class was the author of the book, The First Congress, Fergus Mordowich. Oh, we have to follow up, because Fergus is interested in maybe translating his book in Spanish. Perfect. And I think it would be brilliant.
From the university.
But as you'll recall, he talked about how important it was, how difficult it was to have the Constitution which said, in theory, we're going to create a Congress. What did that become, and what issues did they have to resolve? A wonderful scholar, and his other book was about, more recent book was about our Civil War period. He's a scholar of many, many books, but his book had come out about the Civil War. The next speaker, next we had, I think it was next slide one. Next slide was the legal system. Peter Irons, the author of the Citizens, People's History of the Supreme Court. And again, what a privilege to learn from the man who wrote the book on his insights. And I recommend that book so much because he talks about how often a 1 or 2 person difference on the Supreme Court completely changed the course of direction of things we now take for granted. And then not only his historical analysis that day, but we had Judge Jim Ho, the district court judge that went up, who gave us the insights about what it was like to serve on the U.S. District Court and or Circuit Court rather, I said District Circuit Court of the United States, which is 1 court down from the Supreme Court. And Jim, as you may recall, had played a very serious his role on some very important decisions. To me, I should say this about the whole thing. I'm talking not just about the subjects they covered, but to me personally, the example of these people as human beings, as thoughtful, dedicated, modest public servants trying to make the country a better place and the world a better place. It really came through with Jim talking about this was my role and his openness to thinking about things in new ways. And he hasn't written a book, but his decisions are so admirable and his thought process. Next week, we followed that up. What's that?
No, there was a.
Yes, Kathleen Duvall, remember, literally wrote us before, a brilliant historian who wrote us, I think 5 minutes before she was going to be coming on because there was a school shooting and they were in lockdown, so she couldn't join us. She's offered to do another time, but it didn't work to join us this cycle. Next was Scholars of Congress. Norm Ornstein, who, Brad Fitch heads up the Congressional Management Foundation, which is the independent organization that advises members of Congress and their staff. Nonpartisan. How can you make your office work better to serve the public better? Brad talked about that. The next person we spoke with was Norm Ornstein. Norm Ornstein has been a scholar of our Congress for more than 3 decades. And if you were to ask in America, who are the top 5 most respected congressional scholars, Norm Ornstein would almost surely, for 20 years or more, have been on that list. He's also very passionate about congressional continuity, which he and I work very closely on. And he's very concerned about the decline of the Congress as an institution where real debate goes on and where it's been supplanted by political posturing, speech making, extremism, rather than collaborative working together for the good. Norm, interestingly, we didn't come out, but he's very passionate about mental health. Norm tragically lost a son to schizophrenia, which his son suffered from mental illness, and he and his wife have been very outspoken to try to help mental health issues. And then our third speaker was Gene Bordowich, who had been a staff member on the Senate Rules Committee, had worked on changing the filibuster, and also had been in charge of the inauguration preparations under the Obama administration. And she had worked for a group called Democracy Fund, they shoot me. The Hewlett Foundation, which is one of the many civic society organizations. Then we had the great honor of having Mark Stanley, our U.S. ambassador. As many of you know, this is a particularly important year for us, 200th year anniversary of the friendship between Argentina and the United States. I think Mark, myself, I think he's doing a remarkable job as our ambassador. And I really enjoyed getting to know him and his wife and family here. And I just think he's a model of a person who's reaching out to the host country, proactively building relationships, listening, learning. He did a marvelous thing Saturday afternoon, there was a special concert in Teatro Colón. And they played Argentinian music and American music. And there's a piece by our famous composer, Aaron Copland, and it involves reading about Abraham Lincoln. With the symphony around him, Mark read that passage, and he did a brilliant job, and it was very moving. My son, who's 18, Walter, came out of that, 18, normally you think 18, you're allowed. He said, Dad, it made me feel like I was part of something greater than myself.
Oh, that's so.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I shared that with Mark. So next, then we had Bob Mary, my dear friend, a presidential scholar and historian, who's now got a brand new book coming out about the pre-Civil War era. You'll remember Bob gave his impressions about why Trump had risen to popularity. What was it he touched? How had the major parties gotten out of touch with the average person? And what it took to be a good leader, and what happens when you get bad leaders. And Bob had, I think, very subtle insights into how we pick our president, why we pick them, what their role is. And also one of the more respected journalists, presidential journalists we have. That same day, then we had this great class where we had local government people. Remember the two county commissioners, Nate and Jared, who from different political parties came together to have hearings and local communities to say, we can work together, we're friends, we're not combatants, we share many things in common, and being available to the public. They both respected one another, they are friends, they trust each other, they don't engage in the, you're a Republican, you're evil, you're a Democrat, you're evil. They find common ground. We also heard that same class, that's Jared, from Monica Stonier, who is one of the leaders in our state legislature, a brilliant young woman, a teacher. You may remember she's an educator, and she ran for the state legislature. Her job's interesting. Our legislature is part-time. So part of the year she's in the legislature, part of the year she's in the classroom. In her case, she's what's called an expert teacher. So she teaches teachers how to teach. You remember, I just think she's brilliant and a wonderful legislator. And then Susan Judkins, who is a city council member at the grassroots level, trying to make her city better. That's the local level of government, as you have here. And been mayor as well. And she gave her time a very insightful talk. In Iowa, by the way. And then we heard from Mark Hertling, a distinguished military leader. Mark, as you may recall, is a prominent commentator on CNN. If you watch American English language CNN, Mark is often there. What I admire about him is he doesn't say more than he knows. Some people go on these, they'll talk about anything. It's like, well, that's your opinion about the Middle East. How about China? Well, Mark will say, he's be the first to say, that's not my area of expertise, but very thoughtful person and a very distinguished military leader as well. Next, we had people talking about elections. You remember Lisa Grove, my personal pollster, who had polled for the Obama campaign, for the Clinton campaign, not always directly for the campaign, but during those elections and for the Biden campaign. You may remember she talked about, rather shockingly, that the Clinton campaign did not do what we call tracking polling for the last 2.5 months of the campaign. So they didn't know how much trouble we were in. The other thing that really I remember from Lisa was she was pointing out that the shift to cellular phones, people not answering their phones, etc., is making polling less accurate. Look what happened here, right? Nobody saw the result of the PASO coming. Nobody saw the margin in the general the way it was. Nobody saw the margin in the final. But what Lisa said is more and more, they're going to actually do, instead of cell phones or computer online polls, they're going straight to the door, straight to people, one-on-one. Who are you going to vote for and why? I thought that was fascinating. And the subtle framing of issues that Lisa talked about, for example, how tiny wording about is the issue, back to Biden, was the issue his age or that he's out of touch? It may be more that he's out of touch. So that's a different a different way of phrasing it. Then Monica Evans, the director of elections for the city of Washington, D.C., a distinguished attorney, election professional, talked about all that they're doing to try to help people be more able to vote and encourage them to vote, but also the threats that our election workers are experiencing, especially from the hard right, who's claiming that the elections have been stolen and we're losing people they don't want to even serve. I have to tell you, and I've said it before, going to your election places here and seeing average citizens participating as elections observers, seeing no threats, no intimidation, people going in person to vote, doing their civic responsibility, was very moving to me and to my colleagues. Next. And then we heard from Denny Heck, who has been a member of the state legislature, very prominent, chief of staff to a governor, a member of the United States Congress, founder of 3 different private enterprises, all of which were very successful, and now the lieutenant governor of the state of Washington, in which role he presides over the state senate, and has been remarkable in that. A man of great modesty with great accomplishments, and
governor is like vice governor.
It's like vice governor, yeah. And in a similar way that the vice president presides over the Senate in our Congress, and I believe in yours,
Yeah.
but in a better way, maybe. But Denny presides in a very able way in the Senate. When I say better, what I mean is Denny's not partisan in that position. He's not there to say, I'm a Democrat as a lieutenant governor, therefore my job is to favor my party. Denny has gotten stuff done, things done in that role that had not been done before. Why? Because he's respected by both sides and he's fair to both sides. And he's got that character about him. We also then had 2, and why don't you recap the people from?
Sí, Adrián Míguez from American Chamber of Commerce, and Beatriz Nofal, I think we all know her. It was a very good complementation.
A great presentation. Yes, we talked about international relationships between chambers of commerce and with marvelous. We had the amazing good fortune to have a delegation of former members of Congress visit right at the time of the election. I can't tell you how important that is. People who knew nothing about Argentina came away feeling very warmly and positively about Argentina. Juan de Dios, as he does, is very modest, but he invited the director, the director of elections, and
Alejandro
Trujillo, not only did the class come and speak to you, but the day of the election, Alejandro Trujillo took his own time to come meet with them at the hotel, give them an hour discussion of how elections are run, how they count the votes, and then we took a bus to the election sites. And then as you met Karen English, who had been a member of our House Ethics Committee, the Committee on Congressional Ethics. And you met Peter Horgelton, who had been chairman of the Republican Party of Massachusetts. And you heard from former Ambassador Tim Romer, U.S. Ambassador to India, and also a friend of mine, the United States Congressman, and of course, Doug Holtz-Aiken. You remember when Doug Holtz-Aiken, when I said, Doug, how did you handle it when you were going to evaluate a proposal of your own party in a way that they were not going to like? Do you remember that session? He said, I start the day, I look in the mirror, and I say, tell the truth. That's pretty powerful. And the truth he does, because he's very concerned about our fiscal budget, and he tells the truth about it, which is not always easy. Next slide. Then, what fortune we had, Chris Novoselic, bass player for Nirvana, but wasn't he a thoughtful analyst of what's happening in politics today and how we can change the system to re-inspire young people and make the system work better? And his knowledge of different ways of voting, whether it was ranked choice or orden de preferencia voting, or whether it was the ways we shape our congressional districts, and how, remember, he talked about how people want simple solutions and they want to get all passionate, and sometimes it's a longer, slower. And here's he's inspired many young people, and I just have so much respect for him. I enjoyed that presentation so much. Next, was Arthur Lupia, who talked about, well, first, oops.
Okay, I don't have
That's okay. Arthur Lupia, remember the University of Michigan professor who is an expert on political communication across political divides, and his points about how we think that we have the knowledge, we'll give it to the person, and that will change the person, but we forget that the person actually is going to do something with whatever they hear, and we have to meet them where they are and share things in their language. And then, of course, Bob Inglis on climate change, the Republican who was willing to lose his job in Congress because he believes climate change is real. And he talked about not only climate change, but what's happened to American politics and how we think we can address climate change with a revenue neutral carbon tax. Then we had David Horsey, the political cartoonist, who you remember shared those marvelous drawings of his. And by the way, his book is one of the books that we're going to gift to the school next week. So if you want to see more of his books. And then, of course, in addition to David that day, we had Marcy Harris, who was so brilliant about computer technology, AI, and other things, and how we can engage the public. Marcy works very well, by the way, and very closely with Beth Noveck. And Marcy, Beth, and I worked together create the first mock hearing of Congress, which ultimately is how I met Juan de Dios, which is how I'm here. So, and then Maya McGinnis. Brilliant about the state of the federal budget deficit and debt and what it's going to take to fix it, and so dedicated and very much relevant to what's needed. How are you going? We can't keep passing debts on to our kids. And remember, Maya talked about the portion of the U.S. federal budget being taken up by interest payments. We pay more in interest now than all programs for children combined, just to service the debt. And the children are going to inherit the debt. So anyway, she's absolutely brilliant. It was great to hear from her. And then next we have, oh my gosh, I have a meeting coming up. I'm gonna jump on. Then we had Matt McWilliams talking about on fascism, and then his remarkable study of fascism around the world. And then who else did we have? We're getting close. Oh, Michael Smith, of course, talking about national security leaders for America, and General Stanley McChrystal, who was astonishing. And his book, My Share of the Task, is a great read. And then, of course, tonight, we finished with that I mentioned Stan McChrystal. And it wasn't the clarity of his talk was so powerful. And then Beth, what was interesting to me about Beth was how way ahead of things, how far ahead she was trying to deal with technology and governance. It was really, really striking.
Excellent.
So, and all of this complemented by the expertise of everyone on this on the panel here that I see, all the familiar faces I've gotten to know. So we'll get together again next week. And I was just about to. We'll get together again next week. We will be sending around evaluation forms. Please fill them out as honestly and detailed as you can. And thanks everyone for the profound privilege of being with you. And we will see you all next Monday. Gracias a todos. Gracias.
Bueno, cualquier.
Terminamos, Dayana, gracias.
Lo siento,
Gracias a ustedes, buenas noches.
Chao, Sol, gracias.
¿Cuánto estás pensando de cada uno?